Well, thank you, everyone. It's always a dangerous spot to be the person right after the coffee break, but I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'm Derek Chollet from the U.S. Department of State. And Chairman Grimson, it's great to be with you today, and I want to congratulate you and everyone here for such a terrific Arctic Circle event. It's not my first time in Iceland, but it is my first time at this event, and it's truly remarkable what you have done, and all compliments to you to bringing attention to the important issues of the Arctic. The conversation today is most timely for the United States because, as has been noted, we just released an Arctic strategy last Friday in Washington. It's available on the website of the White House. I would commend it to all of you, but I and my colleagues here today will talk a little bit about that Arctic strategy and how the United States and the Biden administration see the Arctic. It reflects, this new strategy is the first update in nearly a decade, and it reflects the priority that we place on the Arctic. In fact, our new Arctic strategy is embedded within our national security strategy, which was released just yesterday, and that's also available on the White House website. And you will see in that national security strategy that the Arctic is singled out as one of the 7 issue areas of priority for the United States, including alongside, I should say, with Indo-Pacific, the Middle East, and the transatlantic relationship. So I will offer a quick overview of our Arctic strategy, and then my colleagues from across the U.S. government will speak in further detail about the strategy. If I could sum up our approach to the Arctic in one phrase, it would be enhanced commitment. And that really starts in the most basic way, which is showing up to conferences like this, showing up diplomatically in terms of our presence in this region, as well as militarily and economically. In this year's assembly, you're going to see a record-setting number of American participants, including from the private sector, from academia, from state and local governments, particularly very strong contingents from Alaska and Maine, and of course from the federal governments, from the Department of State and the White House, the Department of Homeland Security. I would be remiss also if I did not mention that we have a culinary artist from Alaska who is here cooking up dishes using Arctic ingredients right here at the assembly. Now, beyond our presence, this enhanced commitment informs every aspect of our Arctic strategy. And the strategy builds on the principles we have advanced in the Arctic for decades. It reaffirms that the United States seeks an Arctic region that is peaceful, stable, prosperous, and cooperative. Yet, as we have already noted over the course of the first session, we are witnessing significant challenges to achieving these common goals. And realizing our vision during this dynamic and difficult period requires U.S. leadership at home and abroad. The new strategy rests on 4 mutually reinforcing pillars: climate change and environmental protection, sustainable economic development, international cooperation and governance, and security. And under these priority areas, we will continue to consult, coordinate with allies and partners, and co-manage with Alaska Native tribes and communities. The U.S. will focus our plans on long-term investments. We will work to develop new ideas and approaches, and we will work with a broad set of stakeholders, deepening our relationships with our allies and partners, and leveraging the strengths across the United States, our federal government, and state and local governments. So I want to briefly focus on 4 elements of the strategy. First, climate change. With the Arctic warming at 4 times the rate of other regions, climate change is threatening Arctic communities, livelihoods, and infrastructure. The new strategy will direct new investments in sustainable development to improve the livelihoods for Arctic residents, build resilience, and diversify the region's economy and energy generation, thus conserving the environment and reducing emissions from the Arctic. The U.S. will continue to work with partners on a broad global climate mitigation effort, improving scientific understanding and research, especially on conservation, biodiversity, ecosystems, and habitats. Second, the strategy recognizes the significant and growing economic opportunities in the Arctic. The United States will pursue sustainable economic development following high standards involving local communities and indigenous knowledge. Now, that's going to mean investing in infrastructure, improving access to services, and supporting the growing economic sectors. We're also going to work with our allies and partners and leverage relevant U.S. government mechanisms and programs to expand high-standard, private sector-led investment in sustainable development. And that's going to be through our DFC, the Development Finance Corporation, the Exim Bank, and the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. We're going to have to secure critical infrastructure, and to do that, we're going to have to work with our allies and partners to strengthen capacity to screen prospective investments based on national security concerns and supply chain resilience. And third, the strategy, of course, has to adapt to new geopolitical realities, increasingly characterized by tensions, unfortunately characterized by tensions, with Russia and the People's Republic of China. We must stand together to support Ukraine and punish and isolate Russia. It's absolutely critical that we do so. But here in the Arctic, Russia's recent actions have put new pressures on a region that has been long characterized by peace and cooperation. Over the past decade, Moscow has invested billions in militarizing the Arctic. It's been building or modernizing bases, expanding its icebreaker fleet, and testing dangerous novel weapons systems. Russia is imposing unlawful demands and rules along its Arctic coastline. This undermines the principle of freedom of navigation. And at the same time, the PRC, the People's Republic of China, has shown its eagerness to gain a toehold in the Arctic. Beijing has quieted its claims to be a near Arctic status, but it continues to invest in new icebreakers, develop natural resources, especially critical minerals and fish, expand its network of potentially dual-use scientific installations, and attempt to influence Arctic governance. Now, some of this may be simple opportunism. Beijing might perceive a more isolated and weakened Russia as an opportunity to assert greater influence and presence in the Arctic. Just last month, the PRC conducted joint naval formations with Russia off the coast of Alaska. Of course, there's been some positive developments as well in the geopolitical outlook, and one byproduct of Russia and China's actions is that a community of like-minded nations is more united and stronger. And the imminent accession of Finland and Sweden into NATO is evidence of countries' rejection of authoritarian expansionism and bullying. Our new Arctic strategy acknowledges these new realities and the increasing strategic competition in the Arctic. It seeks to position the United States to both effectively compete and manage tensions. It aims to deter threats to the U.S. homeland and to our allies by enhancing our ability to defend our interests in the Arctic while, importantly, coordinating shared approaches with allies and partners. The United States will maintain a robust presence in the Arctic to protect the American people and defend our sovereign territory. The United States will continue to invest in polar security cutters. We will modernize domain awareness to detect potential airborne, aerospace, and maritime threats. We will enhance our sensing and observational capabilities, including for sea, ice, ship traffic, and weather. And we will develop communications and maritime transportation infrastructure. Fourth, the foundation of our strategy is strengthening our alliances and partnerships, underscoring the importance of diplomacy and working closely with our allies and partners. The United States will work to sustain institutions for Arctic cooperation and find new ways to cooperate as well. The Arctic Council remains at the heart of these efforts. Our Arctic strategy reaffirms our longstanding policy that the Council remains the premier body for Arctic coordination, where Arctic stakeholders identify and craft solutions for shared challenges. We are pleased that we have been able to resume much of the work of the Arctic Council on those projects that do not involve Russia, nearly 60 to 70% of the Arctic Council's work. And we've also benefited from strengthening bilateral relationships across the Arctic, including, very importantly, here in Iceland, over the past several years. We have reestablished a diplomatic consulate in Nuuk. We have expanded defense cooperation agreements across the High North, and we have launched the Minerals Security Partnership to foster secure, resilient, and sustainable supply chains for critical minerals among like-minded partners. Going forward, the United States will continue to work with our valued neighbor, Canada, to modernize NORAD. We will expand information sharing with Arctic allies and partners, and we will increase our focus on combined training and exercises. The United States has shown we will continue to demonstrate a strong commitment to the Arctic region. That's a charge that President Biden and my boss, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, has given us. We will do so by expanding our diplomatic presence across the Arctic, and we will nominate for the first time an ambassador at large for the Arctic region. We will also aggressively pursue the objectives laid out in the new national strategy for the Arctic region, and we're going to look to our allies and partners to work with us as we travel down this path. Now, closer to home, we are very fortunate to have alongside us in these efforts strong partners in the United States Congress. And I can say at a moment in Washington where there seem to be very few issues that our political parties can agree on, a strong U.S. role in the Arctic is one of them. So I will now turn the podium over virtually to our friend, Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who I know is well known to this circle, this forum. She's off campaigning right now, otherwise she would definitely be here, but she's going to be here by video, and she has been absolutely instrumental in ensuring that the Arctic receives the attention it deserves, and she has been a critical partner of the Biden administration in our development of our Arctic strategy. So her pre-recorded remarks will follow now, and I appreciate all of your time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and we appreciate that Senator Murkowski has taken time from her campaign.
For the first time in many years, I cannot attend the Arctic Circle Assembly with you. This is due to our federal elections. But to President Grimson, to you and your team, thank you. I'm sure that this year's assembly will be another powerful event. As you meet, we're all looking back on what has been a hallmark year for the Arctic, for reasons both good and bad. Russia's illegal and unprovoked war against Ukraine has challenged the region and the world. Because of Russia, the Arctic Council paused activities for the first time in its history. Finland and Sweden are joining NATO, and Europe is facing an energy crisis that is rippling through the global economy. The Arctic Council has since resumed some activities on a limited basis with what we are now calling the Arctic 7. And that's in recognition of the very important work to be done, both across the Arctic and within our individual Arctic nations. In the midst of Russia's war against Ukraine, I have pushed policymakers in the United States to take our role as an Arctic nation more seriously. And I'm pleased to say that we are slowly but surely making progress. Our new infrastructure law is the largest investment in U.S. infrastructure and competitiveness in our nation's history. I've often referenced how there are two Arctics, a well-developed and connected one in Europe, and an underdeveloped and unconnected one in much of North America. The need for action on infrastructure was clear, and in less than a year's time, so are the benefits of this legislation. It is bringing funding and assistance for road, port, airport, broadband, energy, water and wastewater systems to our Arctic, delivering modern infrastructure and improving the standard of living in our high north. Our first deep water port in the Arctic has received initial funding. And at my urging, the Department of Defense has taken necessary and overdue steps that will increase its leadership. In Anchorage, we recently opened the Ted Stevens Center for Arctic Security Studies, which will build partnerships throughout the Arctic to ensure the region's future is guided by rules and norms that help keep it safe and secure. We also created a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Arctic Affairs and Global Resilience, which will be a new office in our Pentagon. I recently introduced the Arctic Commitment Act. This is a comprehensive measure addressing trade, shipping, research, commerce, and maritime security in the Arctic. And it includes a sense of Congress supporting a free trade agreement with Iceland, and also incorporates the Iceland Act to boost investment and trade with our friends there in Iceland. Many of you know that I've been pushing for years for the U.S. to have high-level diplomatic representation to reflect and project our nation's Arctic interests and values. And just last month, our State Department announced the establishment of an Arctic ambassador. The President is now responsible for nominating someone for this new position, and the Senate will confirm them to serve as our chief Arctic diplomat. Now, I mentioned at the outset of my remarks that we're in the midst of our midterm elections, and in a recent special election in Alaska, a new Congresswoman was elected. She is the first Alaska Native to hold federal office in the United States. This is something truly worthy of note. With so many issues on the table, Arctic diplomacy, climate, food security, defense, governance, I know that there will be no shortage of thought-provoking discussions and networking at the Assembly this week. I'm already missing the engagement, but know that I'm looking forward to seeing you all next year. Thank you so much. Take care and be well.